Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home. Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome to the Freebirth Society podcast. This is a radical space for women who are ready to celebrate their autonomous choices in birth, motherhood, and beyond. Together, we'll learn about wild birth through personal narrative, we'll explore the politics of birth, and we'll analyze everything that relates to our lives as women from a feminist perspective. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
It's been a while, freedom child, since I've left my roots back home.
Sister, is birth work your calling? Do you long to witness and support the awesome power of women as we make life, form kinship, and transform the world through undisturbed mother-centered birth? In your most expansive vision of your life, are you the authentic midwife of your community, walking in total grace, reciprocity, and trust with women through the sacred portal of pregnancy and birth? Then our groundbreaking Radical Birthkeeper School is for you. It is an immersive, live, intensive mastermind in all things authentic midwifery that will give you the blueprint and guidance to launch a life-altering, world-shaking radical birth brand and business. Think birth business mastermind, life-changing coaching intensive, deep dive into all things birth, step-by-step roadmap for serving women authentically, and the wise woman initiation that you have been dreaming of, all rolled into one epic program that will change your entire life. It is time to become the lighthouse that guides women home to ourselves. Head to freebirthsocietycourses.com/radicalbirthkeeper now to claim your spot and say yes to your calling. Today on the show, we have Natalie from Australia sharing her story of the journey to free birth with her second son. After finding the Freebirth Society podcast in her early postpartum days with her first baby, Natalie vowed to set herself up to embody her prayer of free birthing her next baby. When the time came, Natalie had a truly wild pregnancy and shares with us how she faced the fears that were surrounding her and how she protected her energy and birth space fiercely and entered the vortex of birth to roar her son into the world. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I know you have a pretty rockin' story, so why don't you take us to wherever it begins for you?
Okay, so I think it begins with my first pregnancy and my first son. I free birthed my second son. And with my first pregnancy, when me and my partner walked into that, we were very much well on the way to this kind of wild, sovereign, undomesticated life. And when we were going through that pregnancy, we decided to go through a government-funded program to have a midwife present. So what that meant was that it was a free service.
And
however,
you were in Western
Australia
yeah.
at the time. So in Australia, I think there's a couple of, or maybe 3 or 4 places where they have these government-funded programs. And so it's a free service, and you get to choose a midwife to have through your pregnancy and birth. And you can have them at the birthing center or at home or whatever. However, what comes with that is you have to tick all the little boxes. Like everything has to be, perfect or whatever, this like grade A pregnancy. And that was pretty easy for me. But there was still definitely things that when I look back now caused me you know, the tiniest things that caused me so much stress. And I remember walking through those things and being with my partner and just being like, there's got to be another way. There's got to be another way. And at that point in time, it was like, well, the other way is to hire a private midwife, home birth midwife, and, you know, pay that money. And then we don't have to go through all of this. And
well, but you would still have to go through all of it.
yes, but I think in Australia, like with this specific program, if you have a private midwife, the little things that I went through that they were picking on, what wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I know what you mean, but I just mean like private midwives in Australia still have boxes
Absolutely.
you need to tick, and like
Yes.
you still have to perform right and can easily get risked out. And they're still a part of the system. It's not the like, which I know you know this, I'm telling other people, it's not the like utopian alternative that it might sound like.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, we went through, you know, a pretty easy pregnancy and it was still an incredible, empowering, beautiful, life-altering birth at home in our little apartment. And I gave birth to him in the water, and it was I am very thankful that the midwife that we had was you know, she was respectful of our decisions, and she was very hands off. Like I didn't even know she was there during the birth, the last few hours of his birth. And then kind of skipping to postpartum, I had a beautiful baby boy. I was we were very happy, very connected. Everything was just amazing. And as I was just saying to you before we started recording, I must have been like 6 or 7 weeks postpartum, and I had my baby on my chest one day. My partner was at work, and I must have been scrolling through Instagram, and I came across the Free Birth Society Instagram page, and I was like, oh, what's this? This is interesting. Obviously, I was so into birth because I just had this, you know, transformative experience. And so I started listening to the podcast, and I remember my partner came home that day, and I was just like starry-eyed, and he walked through the door, and I was like, oh my God, you have to listen to what I've been listening to all day. And he was like, what is it? And I just remember it was like this huge light bulb moment for me, and something I'd never considered previous to listening to the podcast. And I remember listening to the first episode and coming away from it and like looking down at my baby and just looking around the place where he had been born and being like, that's what I did, but I had someone there. And in the long run, that person that was there, that system that was there, caused me unnecessary stress. Like it was just me and Zach, my partner, the whole time. Like and then it was just me. Like I birthed my baby. Of course I did.
I would say like, you know, probably the other distinction worth mentioning is the work that happens, which of course you know this because then you went on to have a free birth, the work that happens when a medical provider is absent is uniquely distinct, confronting, and a whole realm of responsibility in and of itself, right? So like, even though the midwife didn't do anything, she was still there in the JIC, right?
Yeah.
And that is great if that's what people want. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? But that piece that's quite like intangible and yet so massive to the choice to birth without a medical provider, I would say is like the other kind of obvious.
Yeah.
Because of course you birth your own baby, of course.
Yes. And absolutely. And I think that was like, when I then started going through my second pregnancy with my second son, Oki, I just remember feeling, you know, obviously going through that whole process and you know, walking through each step and particularly the birth, and recognizing how much of my power I had given away because I was respondent to this person that I knew was going to come into the space.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, like I didn't know she was there the whole time, but I did know when she walked in the door. And I do remember that feeling of like, I suppose, relief. And upon reflection on that, I was looking to an outside source to gain this like, okay, now it's safe to birth, or now it's safe to whatever. And that was something that obviously came up for me a lot during my second pregnancy, which was a completely wild pregnancy.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that that's completely normal, and first time mom, like feeling that sense of relief. There's nothing like when the midwife walks in. I just want to be clear to people listening, like there's nothing, neither you or I are suggesting that that's like bad or that
yeah,
anything like that. But I think the really interesting push around free birth is, what would it feel like to not have that? What would it feel like to lean into want versus need? Right?
yeah,
Like I might want people there, but there's no needing. And yeah.
yeah,
So how, and I also love that you got to experience such an epic birth that wasn't sabotaged from a midwife, and it sounds like a midwife who was really willing to be hands off. And um, I just love how many different avenues there are for people to come to free birth, because it's not a trauma story. It's not, it's actually like quite the opposite. It's like, oh, I literally didn't even need this person here. How cool is that?
yeah,
So how did
yeah.
your partner take it in?
So like just on board straight away.
Nice. Love
Yeah,
that.
he is the eldest of four, sorry, and his mum home birthed all of
I was
them.
like, what?
No, yeah. So when he was 7, when his first sibling was born, so he watched his mum home birth all of
Wow.
yeah. So so what happened after, I got introduced to the podcast around 6 weeks into these stories. And then when Tallow, my first son, was 3 months old, we had packed up all our stuff, moved out of our apartment, and like road tripped across the country to move over to Queensland, which is where we are now. And so on this trip, which our child slept for like the whole way, bless him, he was such a good sleeper, we listened to episode after episode after episode, and we would just sit there in the car in silence, and then the episode would finish and we'd speak over it. And it was just like, our baby was 3 months old, and we were like,
Wow.
okay, this is it, like next pregnancy, like
Whoa.
it's done.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so then when we came to Queensland, we just, I guess, like, as well as free birth again, we just kept kind of continuing to walk away from society and to find our own way. And, we were like very young parents, and just, started learning about all the things like unschooling, and like, okay, that's something we're going to do, and just continuing to further ourselves. We had bought an old school bus, and we were building it into our home. And our plan was to travel throughout Australia in that. And so that's what we started to do. When our son was 1.5, we moved into the bus. And that's actually where we fell pregnant, maybe a year after, being in the bus for a little bit, not even that long, we fell pregnant again. So we had our little toddler. And yeah, we fell pregnant just before he turned 2, and we were just out in nature all the time, like out in these national parks and just in tropical North Queensland, so like far out from mainstream society. And I was going through this pregnancy. I spent the first 3 months of my pregnancy at my mum's house, and our car was parked up because I was so like unwell. And so yeah.
Totally. You do not
Yeah.
like road trip
In a bus.
Oh,
yeah.
God, yeah.
So yeah, we bunkered down for that, and Tallow and Zach would just play outside all day. And then we got back in the bus when I was like 14 weeks pregnant, and we spent my whole pregnancy out in nature together in the bus. And it just felt like the wild pregnancy was just a natural
really wild.
progression. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like a wild pregnancy and then you're like going to an office 40 hours a week. Like, it's like actually wild.
Yeah, it was. I think obviously it brought a lot. It brought a lot up. It's absolutely, it was like this time. It was honestly like I feel bad saying this because now that Oki's here, I'm like, this is the most amazing time of my life. But there was something there was just like this field of energy that was around all of us during that time. And it was incredible. Like, it was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful time. However, it, you know, there was a lot of work that was being done. And when we went into the bus, and our whole like kind of design and our idea of coming, you know, building our bus and coming into it, it was like we were just fully unlearning, relearning, deconditioning. Like, we were doing all of that stuff anyway. And so then to bring you know, a pregnancy and a birth into it, which was, we had 100% trust in myself, my body, our baby, but it's still, of course, like, even for, you know, someone like me and Zach, who I think a lot of people would look at if you know us and be like, oh, they've, you know, of course we've been on this path a while and la la la, but like, it was confronting, and there was shit that we had to work through. And I think the big thing for us was, our little boy would go to sleep every night, and we'd sit on this couch every single night, or we'd lie on the floor, and we would talk about everything. Like, we would talk for hours. We would go through just everything, whether that was birth, pregnancy, like our baby's lives, what it was going to look like with 2 kids, like all of it. And we just debunked everything. And at times it was really uncomfortable. I think where I guess for me, like, coming into the birthing world, I never had any sort of a reflective experience around me. Like, all I knew was that my mum had natural births at the hospital. But there was never any like horror stories around me. There was never, like, my mum never spoke of any trauma that, you know, she had or my grandmother had. And so for me, it was just, I think that when I walked into, you know, Tallow's pregnancy and then Oki's pregnancy, I was just like a sponge, and I knew which way I wanted to go. And I suppose that I'm quite thankful that that was my experience, because I know that, you know, obviously we all have such different experiences. And I think for me that was a I don't know, it was just like, for lack of a better term, I guess it was quite easy for me to just, you know, walk into this and be like, yep, this is what I want to do. I don't really have any other experiences around that, so I'm just going to go for it. I know that's my truth. I know that's my way.
Awesome. But I feel like we need to stop for a second and like give yourself more credit, because it's like, yes, that's awesome that you can like notice where you didn't have a ton of really, really heavy, thick trauma informed stories at your back, but you also like live in the same world as everyone else, you know, and you've also seen all the same movies as everyone else. And like, you know, you still, I think there's something to be said that you also let it be easy, and you let it be simple, and you let it be in aligned with who you are and what you want. And you could have easily not, you know, and still gone the normal mainstream way. And I also really respect that you like really walked the fucking walk, you know, and yes, of course, there's not one way to do that. And, you know, whatever, that's like kind of a heady, you know, sentence, I think, you know what I mean? But like, I know so many people, women, who claim spiritual practice and claim, you know, all of this consciousness raising, and then go get induced. And it's like, what the fuck else are we like working for if we're not taking birth as the peak spiritual experience, right? So yeah,
totally. I so agree with like everything. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, there was of course still all the things that came up, but I think, so I guess what the biggest thing that came up for me was, at this point in time, Zach is really close to his mum. I'm really close to my mum. And Zach's mum, you know, had these beautiful home births, but she was also studying to be a midwife at this time. You know, she was obviously in that world and quite different to what she had. She was, you know, just learning all these, it was just like very different ballgame to what she had been birthing in and what she'd immersed herself in during her pregnancies and births. And she also lived in Western Australia, and we were living in Queensland and living in the bus. So at this point in time, our parents knew, who were obviously like the biggest relationships in our lives, they knew that with what we were doing, if they had anything to say about it, they would just get, we were strong enough to just be like, we'll see you later. Like, we'll see you after the pregnancy. We'll see you, like, yeah, after the baby's born. We're just stop. You know, we're not,
right. Like,
we're not
get
going,
on board, or
yeah,
we'll send you a photo.
yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And so I remember my mum, of course, who I'm super close to and who we were actually living with throughout, you know, the time that we had first moved to Queensland. I could tell that she had feelings of, we'd talk about it, or I was talking to her about it before I was even pregnant. She was like, yeah, wow, okay, cool. Like, and when I was pregnant, and it would come up every now and then, and I could feel she was just like, to her credit, I feel like maybe she was a bit more uncomfortable than what she let on, but she was just kind of like, yeah, okay, like, I just want you to be safe. I just la 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 la. And I was like, yeah, I know, like, I know, and I'm good, I'm here. And I think, again, she knew at this point, she trusted me and she trusted my body. And I really think that she did do that even, and she didn't portray her fears onto me or us if she did have them. And I think there was a few things throughout my pregnancy. There was a few experiences or conversations that happened where at the time I felt like it wasn't affecting me so much. Like, I walked out of the conversation. There was one conversation when we went to visit Zach's family in Western Australia, and I was probably around 30 weeks pregnant. There was one conversation that happened with Zach's mum where I felt really strong, and I felt like I was not, what's the word? Like, I wasn't defending myself. I was just like, essentially, this is my body, this is our decision, this is our baby, and I know that you trust birth, and I know that you trust us, and so you just have to keep leaning into that. But the conversation went on for a little bit too long and kind of kept going around in circles, as you can imagine. And I walked away from it, and I was like, cool, I think that, like, I'm okay. And then, of course, like, right before I gave birth, it fully came up, and I was like, how could we even go into that conversation? Like, why did that even happen? I should have just walked away. I should have been like, this is it, we're done. And so I had to work through that. And then there was a few other little things that happened from people who didn't even fucking know us. Like, which I had to work through this one experience it was actually, again, when we were in Western Australia, and it was Zach's mum's neighbor who had something to say, of course. And I was just me and Zach, I remember just staring at each other and being like, what? Like, who are these people? Like, get out of our lives.
Totally.
So, and then, as you said, of course, there was still stuff that would come up for me, and I would be like, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens? How far away are we going to be from a hospital? And like, la la la. But I absolutely, like, giving myself credit, I just fully fucking went in, and I did at that time. Like, I had so much trust in my body and so much trust in our baby and this journey. And I definitely think, I know that obviously not everyone can have a pregnancy out in nature, traveling in a caravan or a bus or whatever, but I think that was such a huge component in me just, like, protecting my space and not having fear in it, really. Like, again, of course, there was stuff that came up, but
but being able to distinguish, like, what's yours and do the work on that versus being in a sea of what is other people's, which is what most women are navigating, is just like a sea of fear from everybody around them.
Yeah.
You know, you got to actually, like, figure out what was yours and what to do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we gave ourselves the space to do that. And that was such a beautiful gift. So then I think I'll go to, like, a few days before he was born. We were in the bus, and then we were like, well, we better find somewhere to birth, because I don't want to birth in the bus. I want a bigger space. So we found this beautiful little cottage that was down in northern New South Wales, and it was out in the bush on land. And weirdly enough, we went there, it was just like a little rental on a piece of land, and there was like the main house and then this little house, and a woman was living there, like early 40s, with her 2 girls, and she had free birthed her first daughter in that cottage. So she was cool. She was like, yeah, this is so beautiful, this is amazing, like if you need help with tallow when you go into labor, yeah. So that was really nice. You know, she had a nice energy and she was very not invasive in our. So I was let's like backtrack kind of maybe into around 30 weeks pregnant, somewhere around there. You know, throughout the pregnancy we knew that we wanted to have like a friend, someone there to help be in our space. And you know, we kind of contemplated having my mum there, and then we were like, you know what, that's not the right energy. No. Where are we going to go with this? And I think at the time as well, we were really we had some really good friends, but we were kind of all over the place because we were traveling and we'd meet people traveling. And so I was like, who is a solid rock, a foundation? And, you know, over the last like kind of year, friendship had been blossoming with one of my friends, Haley, and this relationship with that I have with Haley in particular, it's just been like so much leveling up for both of us, so many sister wounds come up, like so much growth. And so of course I got to this stage in my pregnancy where I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask Haley. And I remember being like super nervous, like as if she was gonna say no, like,
will you marry me?
Yeah. So I reached out to her and I, you know, sent her like this voice message, and I said, this is why I want you here. And essentially what I needed was I needed to know that Tallow was safe, and I needed to know that he was okay amongst the roaring, because I wasn't, you know, we watched birth videos every single day, and we watched all of like his little friends' mamas give birth, and free birth in particular. But still I was like, of course, like I don't know how he's going to handle it. I don't know if it's going to be too much. I knew that Haley is an incredible holder of space, and I knew that it was going to be everything that I needed it to be. And how I envisioned it was that Haley would be with Tallow and Zach would kind of be more by my side, and Haley and Tal would be like standing back a bit and playing and doing all the things. So that was cool. I had that in place. I was super excited. Like we were very excited to have Haley there. And then coming up to a few days before the birth, or before I went into labor, if we were calculating from my last period, it would have been like literally the day before I was 40 weeks. And I just like had this feeling in my body leading up to these days. And it was I didn't have it with Tallow. And I felt like my baby should be here by now. Like I was like, he wants to come, he wants to be here, but he's not here. I have no real signs of labor. Like it was just this weird feeling that I was like, what's going on? And I was talking to a couple of friends about it, like Haley and another friend. And one of my other friends, I was having this conversation with her, and she was like, well, have you worked, like how are you going with like all of the fear stuff? Like, do you have any fears that you haven't worked through? Is there something else that you need to like touch on or think about or write out? And I was like, no, I have worked through everything. I feel like I've worked through everything. And I walked away from that conversation and just kind of sat on the couch, and all of a sudden all of this stuff started coming up, and I was like, whoa, like what's happening? And so I was like, okay, Zach, take Tallow. They went out for the afternoon, and I just sat on the couch and wrote out everything that I was feeling in my body. And it was like such ridiculous sentences. I would write it out, and as I was writing it out, I would literally laugh. Like, and as you said, I grew up, I'm a part of this society, and I think that's where as soon as I started writing, I was like, none of this belongs to me. This is literally like shit that happens in a movie. but it's there. And I think because I know how ridiculous all of that stuff is, I never really gave it 2 cents. But then when it came to this point, I was like, oh, well, actually, I have seen that in my life, and I need to just get rid of it now.
Yes. And like, you have a living child, you have a living child, and you are heading into the unknown, like, even take away the cultural conditioning, it is spiritually, energetically, just like, whoa, it's just such a unknown, mysterious, somewhat scary, somewhat everything, just like black hole of unknownness, right? It's like it requires such a level of surrender. And I think with the living child aspect of it, that makes sense that there would just be some like big, I don't even have the words for it. Yeah.
Just big things.
Yeah.
So I wrote all this stuff out, and then I was literally laughing to myself as I was writing it out. Like, this is so ridiculous. Like, none of this stuff is mine. And so I ripped out the page from my journal and I went outside, and I'm sharing this because I feel like it's such an incredible thing to do for anyone that's going through pregnancy and birth. And again, like for me, having this moment where I was like, I feel like my baby wants to come, but I haven't gone into labor. And there was like this knowing that, okay, he's like, come on, mum, a little bit more work, like pushing me. So I took out this piece of paper outside, and it was like a really beautiful afternoon. He was born in February in Australia. So summer, and just where we were, the sky, and it was just like the most radical place to give birth. It was so beautiful. And so I went outside and I just like sat on the ground. I had a lighter and I think some sage or something, and I just sat there and held this piece of paper, and I repeated to myself out loud, I return this to its original owners. I return this to its original owners. And I burnt it. And it's so wild, but honestly, I burnt the piece of paper, and I feel like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. It was like wild. And I just felt so at peace. And that night I had a really good night's sleep, and it was just such a nice experience. And then the next morning, I had been losing my mucus plug like 3 days before, and then a little bit more on that day. And then the next morning we woke up and we were like, let's take the bus and drive to the beach for the morning. So we drove to this secluded beach that we'd never been to in the area. And we were like literally the only people on the beach. And Zach and Tallow went to swim in the ocean. And I was like, I'm just going to walk up the beach. And I remember like running and jumping and dancing and just like moving my body. And we had this beautiful morning, just the three of us at the beach. And then we got home and Tallow was asleep, and Zach came out from putting him in the bedroom, and I was just in the kitchen like frantically making lunch, like very frantically, not my energy at all. And he was just kind of observing me, and he was like, like, what are you doing? And I was like, I need to eat. And I think that one of the stories that I told myself was Tallow's labor was 22 hours all up from start to finish. And it started at 2 a.m. in the morning. And I think between that whole time, I had like a piece of toast and some coconut water. And I was really shaky throughout some of his labor because I didn't have any sugar in my body. And so I just remember throughout the pregnancy being like, I need to have a belly full of food. That's going to be different this time. And so Zach was just like, okay. So I made this meal and I ate it. And as soon as I finished it, I was sitting on the couch and I was like, oh, that feels new and different, and like essentially, I guess, really profound period pain. And Zach was like, okay, cool, like, all right, let's just keep going about our day. And sure enough, this period like pain kept happening. And again, it was so it was very different to the experience with tallow, because with tallow I woke up to a contraction, and like a mild contraction, but still that was my first experience. And then I kind of slept throughout the first 4 hours, waking in and out of sleep. And also with Tallow's birth, there was a lot of resistance because it was my first baby. There was, of course, like all this unknown. I wasn't where I was at, obviously, in this pregnancy. And there was, when I look back on it, there was a lot of resistance. And I think that could have been one of the reasons why I labored so long.
You're
or what felt like long. Yeah, I know. I was just thinking that.
Like I heard you say 22 hours and I was like, damn, he flew out. Hey, it's all relative, right? It's all relative.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So good. It was just I feel like it was an experience I didn't have with tallow, to really start feeling through the contractions. And something else that I probably should have said before, but I didn't note, was when me and Zach would stay up at night talking, and throughout that journey of pregnancy, being in the bus and stuff, I would visualize and journal on how I wanted the birth to look. And me and Zach would stay up all night and talk about how I wanted it to look, down to like how I was going to feel. I was, for example, with Tallow's pregnancy, with Tallow's labor, I was so inward that I wasn't really there. Like I wasn't present throughout the whole thing. And I wanted to be more present this time. I wanted to be more present in the physical, and I wanted to be able to move around. I wanted to be mobile, because in Tallow's labor, my experience was that I was pretty much in child's pose or hanging over the fit ball the whole time. And I didn't
hanging on for dear life.
Yeah, like literally, because of the resistance. And I was like, I don't want that. I want to be able to be a bit,
like be with it instead of just like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so that was a huge process for us, just to constantly be visualizing and journaling on how we wanted it to look, down to all the little details. So it was just like a really cool experience to really feel through the contractions, and as they were getting stronger, and just be present and like walk around, and it was just a very different laboring experience for me.
I think it's important to say here, for especially, for first-time moms or women who are in a similar position, that what you did by spending that much time on playing with what you did want and talking it out loud and sharing it with your partner and revisiting it over and over again, you're literally creating a reference point in your mind of familiarity, right? And so it quite literally opens you up to be more available to have it, right? Yeah. And so obviously there's only so much we can do. We're co-creating this thing. It's not like we're in control, but to have spent, it's obviously related that you spent so much time visualizing it and verbalizing it, and then allowed yourself to have it, right? So that then you're calling in that prayer and you're actually living that prayer, because you had spent a whole pregnancy getting familiar with what the prayer was. It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely, that like allowing myself to have it, like totally. Yeah, that's exactly what I did and what we did. And that was so clear to us. Like when we found this rental, I just remember looking around and I'm like, that's where the birth pool goes. That's what's in my head. That's what's been in my head. So it was so wild. But yeah, so I start that first hour of laboring. The next door neighbor, like the person who owned the land, she had a 6-year-old who loved tallow and loved playing. So she'd kind of come over, and Zach was like, okay, let's go over to your side of the house, like of the land. And Zach told the lady, that the mum, that I was, potentially in labor. And so she was like, cool, would you want me to have Tal for a few hours? And I'll bring him back around dinner time and you guys can have some time. So Tal was over there. Zach came back. And so that was about an hour later. So it would have been around 3. And I was still having these like pretty, I wasn't like moaning through anything. I was perhaps stopping and just kind of holding my belly, but there was no moaning yet. And I said to Zach, like, I think we should call Haley. And he was like, he's like, oh God, we're going to be here for hours. This is going to be like Tallow's birth. And he was like, oh, like you might not even be in full blown labor. And I was like,
she's like not going to make it.
I was like, I think we should just call her. So Zach gave her a call. He was on the phone to her. And, I think for us, we were like, we didn't want her to drive 3 hours away if it wasn't. Yeah. And of course she was like, I'm coming. I don't care if Nat doesn't go, whatever. Like, I'm coming, I'm leaving now. And so he got off the phone. And like, as soon as he got off the phone, I just like kind of half fell to the ground and like started roaring through a contraction. And we just ended, and I stood up and we just looked at each other and like started laughing. We were like, okay, definitely good thing that Haley's coming now. And from that point, between like 3 to 5 or 5:30ish, it was again like, I just want to note on the energy that surrounded us and surrounded that cottage. It was fucking crazy. Like, it was so beautiful. And even Corinne was her name, the lady who lived on the land next door, she said to us like a few days later, like, there was like a vortex. There was something, this energy surrounding us. And it was, again, with like the afternoon glow, it was like the most beautiful time to go through labor. And I don't know, I'm just so proud of us for how we set ourselves up like that. And everything truly just happened exactly as it was supposed to.
So good.
Yeah. So yeah, I started, that 2 hours, I think Zach had put on some dinner for him and Tal, and we were just kind of, I was just kind of walking around and moving through the contractions, and every now and then he'd come and I'd hang off him as I'd move through one. And it was super beautiful. And then Tal came back around 5 or 5:30ish, and Zach, I think, gave him a bath and gave him some food, and he was just very prepared to be around me in that state. There was no issue. He was just like, I was using the fit ball a lot, so he'd come up to the fit ball and like rub the bottom of my back, or he'd get his little cars and like drive them around my back, but like so gently. And he'd come up to me with like, Zach would give him the glass of water with the straw in it, and he'd come up to me between contractions and I'd sip on it. And
so
it was
cute.
very, very sweet. It started getting to a point around 6 where, because it was summer, it was still like quite light, but it was, for me, obviously I didn't know the time, but I was looking around and being like, okay, it's going to be Tal's bedtime soon. And my contractions were getting more full on. So they were requiring me to be a lot more inwards and a lot more, I suppose I was starting to feel like I wanted Zach right next to me. And I could really feel that there was this energy of Zach was like, okay, it's getting to this time, Tal needs me, but Nat needs me. And he was trying to, he was like, come on, Haley, where are you? Like, he was kind of, we could both feel it. And it was, he was doing his very best, which I so just, love. But I knew that of course, like, Tallow was going to, start getting really tired. And anyway, so around this time, I think I had sent to him like, hey, do you know how far Haley is? And he was like, she'll be here soon. She's not far. And then I remember hearing her car pull up, and I remember Tal being like, oh, Haley's here. And it was the weirdest experience. Like, I just remember she was wearing like these white flowy pants, and where our front door was, it was like the sunlight was kind of coming down onto it, and they opened the door and she was there, and she just looked like an angel. She seriously, she looked like an angel. And I just looked at her and I burst into tears. And
so cute.
And Tal was just so happy, and she came and gave me a hug and just looked around and was like, I think she said something about like the energy that was happening to Zach. And
I am shocked she made it.
Yeah.
This is like amazing that you told her to come so early, you know?
I know. Yeah.
Oh,
It must have
God.
been it must have been about 6:30 if we'd called at 3 and she left straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I haven't mentioned is that I have a YouTube channel, and back then at that point I was very active in posting on it, not so much now, but I really wanted to film the birth, obviously for our own, you know, reference, but I wanted to be able to share that experience and what, you know, birth can look like. So that was another reason why I wanted Hayley there. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, she could get some photos and maybe help position the camera, whatever. Like, so that was set up around the house, and very like Zach just kind of put it on at one point, turned it on, and then, you know, an hour later he'd maybe move it to another spot and whatever. So that was also going on. But yeah, Hayley came in and started playing with towel, and things started getting more intense, and the birth pool was filling up. And so what happened? I remember Zach coming over to me because the birth pool was like on one side of the house and I was on the other, on the fit ball. And he was like, do you want to, you know, get in the pool? And I think I just remember thinking like, surely it's way too soon to get in the water. But I was like, okay, let's do that. So in between contractions, he helped me kind of stand up and walk towards the pool. And as I got to the edge of the birth pool, I started moving through a contraction. So I kind of just like fell to the ground and started roaring. And from that point on, that must have been around 7:30 or something, maybe 7, I didn't move from there. So that was where he was going to be born. I couldn't get in the pool. I was literally holding onto the birth pool as like a, you know, and every time a contraction would come, I'd be like, hold on to it, roar, let it go. And so at this point as well, Tallow was getting quite tired, and there was this one point, which I want to mention because I feel like it was, again, my own. I want to be better at it in my next in my next birth, when I have my next baby. And essentially what happened was, you know, I did have quite a bit of, is he okay? Like, just that was the one thing that I could have let go of more during that labor. Is Tal okay? Like, he was so fine. He was having a great time, and he wasn't concerned at all. And there was this one stage when I was on all fours and Hayley was kind of behind me, pressing down on my hips and stuff when I was going through a contraction. And I started moving through a contraction quite vocally. And I looked up because I was kind of looking down. And as I looked up, I would have had this like bewildered look in my eyes, you know, like very much in the vortex. And I saw Tallow right in front of me. And as soon as I saw him, he was fine. But as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, like, what's he doing right in front of me? Where's Zach? Why isn't Zach with him? And he felt that energy, and he just burst into tears and ran over to Zach, who was just walking over from getting a glass of water. And I just remember being like, you have to be with him. You have to be with him. And I just remember Hayley like whispering to me, like, Nat, he's fine. Like, yeah. He's so fine. And from that point, Zach put him in the carrier and was trying to get him to sleep. So they were just kind of, and it turned out that actually what Tallow needed was, he needed Zach, and Hayley was with me for like 2 hours on the ground, moving, you know, helping me move through, just being there for me, holding space for me. And she did such a friggin' incredible job at that. I'm so grateful that we asked her to be there. So Tallow fell asleep, and Zach went into the bedroom and was trying to put him down. But every time he'd put him down, I would start roaring, and then he would sit up, and then Zach would put him on his shoulder and try and pat him to sleep, and back and forth, back and forth.
It's like a Monty Python skit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But I hear you on like wanting to release even more. But I also feel like it's the mind's job to find something to trip on. And like, maybe you will reach some ascension level birthing enlightenment, but like, it'll probably just be that you'll trip on something different next time. And that's not a problem. Like that's literally the mind's job, is to be like the primal, the primal part of you is assessing your whole environment constantly when you're in labor, right? You know that, of course. And so that's going to happen every time you birth, where a part of you is going to be like, are my kids okay? Am I okay? That's like the running back track. Like, am I okay to do this? Right. And then the rest of you is doing it. So I don't think that's
that's so that's
good
so
luck. Let me know.
I will. That's so true. And it's so like nice to hear that reflection, because of course you can't, that, as you said, it's the mind's job. There's always going to be something, whatever it is. And so obviously that's what it was for me at that time. We get to this point where I'm like, I say the noises that I'm making change, and they change the exact same way that they changed when I was birthing, in labor with Tallow, and it got to the point where I was pushing. And Zach's in the other room and he's hearing the change in the voice and he's like, okay, all right. And he's starting to pick Tallow up to put him back in the sling to then walk out, because he knows that it's getting serious. And as he's thinking that, I say to Haley, I can feel his head. I can feel the baby's head. And Haley kind of was like, yeah, whatever, Nat, like, and she's like, okay. And she looks down and sees that his head is crowning and screams at the top of her lungs, Zach, like, to try and get him to come out.
Subtle, Haley.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So she's like, Zach, and he had already caught on and was running out of the bedroom. And as he's running out and like falls to the ground with Tallow in the sling next to me, his head comes out, like the rest of his head comes out, and his body comes out.
Did Tallow stay asleep?
So he was very starry. He was awake at that point. Yeah,
but not freaking out.
No, he was very much like half awake, half asleep. I think
that's nice.
I think you've seen that photo from right after birth where we're all on the ground and Tal's in the sling, and you can see his eyes are like super glassy.
I'm gonna look it up.
But yeah, so his body comes out and Haley actually caught him, and then she caught him from behind, because I was like, Haley, get him. So yeah, he came out and Haley handed him through me, because I was on all fours, and I kind of grabbed him and I held him to my chest, and as he came out, like as his head was coming out, he made this little, like the tiniest little cry and that was it. And it was like, we all felt like it was just him letting us know that he was okay and well. And like, so I came out, put him on my chest, and he was just like asleep on my chest, just like breathing and just like so sweet, just asleep. And Tallow was just, we were just like, oh my God, all the things, all of the emotions. And I was just like, oh my God, I did it. We did it. I think I just kept saying like, we did it. And Tallow was looking at him, and then we looked and saw that he was another little boy, and we were like, this is like, you've got a baby brother. And he's like, dozing off, half asleep.
Totally.
And so we, sat there for about 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And then we had like a little, a mattress on the floor next to the couch set up. So I went on the mattress, and Zach went and finally put Tallow back down to sleep. And then the three of us just sat on this mattress, and they were, both of them were tending to me. And as we went on in the night, so it was from like, I went into labor at 2, he was born at 8:45. And there was a point where I had said to Zach at like 3 p.m, I was like, I'm going to be holding this baby by 9 o'clock tonight. And Zach did not believe me, but he was like, yep, okay. And so then we just hung out in the, the newborn bliss bubble, just in absolute awe and amazement, and just he opened his eyes and started, it was just like the most incredible experience ever.
Do you remember much about your placenta?
Yeah, so about an hour, maybe just over an hour after he was born, I was just sitting on, like, lying on the couch with Oki, and he fed straight away and all that. And we had the metal bowl ready, and about after an hour, I looked at them and I was like, I think it wants to come out. I think I'm ready to try, like, maybe just try and push. And so Zach was next to me holding Oki, and we had the bowl. I just kind of like propped myself up, put the bowl underneath me, pushed, and it came out. Like as soon as I said it would. And then we kept his cord attached for maybe a couple more hours, and then before we went to bed, we clamped it and cut it. And then we just went to bed as like a family of four. Like it was just, woke up the next morning and Talo looks over and he's like, baby. And we're like, yeah, baby.
This is our new life.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's just always the most like crazy and mundane thing all at the same time. It's so weird.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly how to explain it. Yeah.
So how old is the younger baby?
He's 18 months now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how does it feel to be a family of four and to be this powerful, free birthing, wild mother now?
Yeah, like that experience like really changed so much for us, or just like it feels good. And it was such a huge, like, honestly, going from one kid to two kids, like one kid was a breeze, and we felt it was just so natural, and it didn't like change anything like it changed a lot, but like, you know, we still traveled, we still did all these things. It didn't feel how society makes you think it's going to feel. And then we had our second baby, and even with this, you know, euphoric birth and pregnancy, like my postpartum was pretty wild. It was pretty full on for a while there, especially the first 8 months. And also he was born like 2 weeks before everything went mental with everything that's going on in the world. So I was just like in full like mama lioness mode. Like, I need to keep them safe. I need to just, you know, like all of that, like, yeah, unnecessary anxiety as well. So it was big. It was really big. It was really big for us to go through it all. And we just feel like at the beginning of this year that we started getting things kind of down packed. And now we feel, I mean, it's still wild. Every day is a fucking ride. Like 2 children is just, yeah, it's wild. But now that Oki's big and walking around, they're like the best of friends. They, you know, play with each other and they keep each other occupied. But it was,
living the dream.
Yeah, it was definitely a big shift though. So yeah.
Awesome.
But we're doing good.
Well, where can women find you? You mentioned you had a YouTube channel. Why don't you tell everyone where people can find you if they want to go see your birth video and your beautiful life?
Thank you. So my Instagram, both my Instagram and my YouTube Is Natalie Alaska. So just how you spell those. And I do share more on my Instagram right now about just like, you know, the kind of wild life that we're living. And I share a lot about birth because I'm very passionate about that, but about other things as well. And then, yeah, if you were to type in Natalie Alaska free birth or home birth on YouTube, the video would come up. You'd find my channel, and yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And that's it for today, my sisters. Check out everything we do, including one-on-one and group coaching, learn about our private membership, in-person retreats, and more on freebirthsociety.com. Our online courses are on freebirthsocietycourses.com, including our flagship course, The Complete Guide to Free Birth. Don't miss the Radical Birthkeeper School if you're ready to become the authentic midwife that women are searching for. Together we rise, and the revolution starts inside each of us. I'll leave you with our Free Birth Society theme song, Wild Woman by Aruba Red.
I honor you for the wisdom you held, the ancient traditions of plant medicine and womb magic. I feel the spirit of the ancestors as I place my hands upon my belly. This sacred portal will be honored. Eons upon light beams of survival, withstanding the eradication of our power by design. I will not allow the separation of our young to be forced upon me. My sisters will no longer birth in captivity. The picket line redefined from burning our wild women to paralyzing us and drugging our babes. Strapped down in a clinical white bed, drying up the milk from our breasts. Keep your needles. My family will never again be doomed to chase those dragons or your poison. We reject your fear. We choose love. Everything with intention. Death, ascension. I will fly and bring her back from the stars. Conscious